Hopefully we'll see something. Yeah.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us at this session. So my name is Jackie White. I am the lead technical officer for Primary Authority. I'm joined in today's session by my colleague Stuart, who also works in the local delivery team, and my colleague Marcia, who works in the training standards coordination team. So today's session is on the end of the EU transition period. I'm hoping that we can all take something away from this session. So it's not just about you learning from us, but it's certainly about us learning from you as well. So for the first 5 minutes of the session, I just want to really engage with yourselves and learn really about where you're at in terms of thought processes in the EU transition. So if we can go to Menti. Has everybody heard of Menti? So I'm posing that as a question. I'm hoping that a lot of you have. So Menti is an app which you can access on your smartphones. So if you've got a smartphone at hand, if you could all enter menti.com. What will happen is when you enter that and go onto that site, there'll be a screen which gives you the option to enter a code. And I'll give you all just a moment just to your phones and to get onto menti.com.
You can, of course, open it if you're on a computer, just on a normal web browser as well.
Brilliant. Okay, and the code which you need to enter the first session is 1392289. And when you enter that code, so the code has been put into the chat as well. And when you enter that code, hopefully the first question will appear. And the first question that I'd like you to answer is, how prepared do you feel for the end of transition? On a scale of 1 to 8, if you could enter a vote, so 1 being not confident at all, and 5 being extremely confident based on the information that you've got currently, you're extremely happy and confident. So if you can all enter your votes, that would be great. And then we can at least just gauge where sort of yourselves in local authorities are feeling currently about the end of the EU transition. So I think we're gauging around 2.2%. So certainly towards the lower end, opposed to the higher end. Okay, I'll just give that a couple, well, another minute just to let you all put that in. So 3, Emma, thank you for that, Emma. So 3, so slightly higher than what's looking like the average. So I think, yeah, so I think that's probably where I expected most people to be, was around sort of the middle mark, really, between sort of having some confidence and still, obviously, we are all still waiting for some answers. So that's great. So the second question that I want to put to you all is, what are your post-EU transition concerns? So what concerns you most about sort of where you're at currently and where you need to be going into sort of, well, beyond post-transition? So if you can, that question should have now come up on your Menti screens, on your Menti app. So if you can add in, there is a 250 word limit. So hopefully you can all put in some ideas there. Brilliant. So we've got some answers coming in. So importers, additional workloads. Absolutely. I think COVID's taken us all yeah, sort of taken up all of our times, and EU transition, I think, has been moved for a lot of us down the priority list, which fortunately we have got timescales, and it is making it difficult. So keeping up with the changes, being confident I now understand the legal framework. Changing of goalposts, absolutely, and certainly some goalposts are still to be set, aren't they? So I think we're all in that position. Businesses not complying with safety labelling standards. Yeah. Exporting Northern Ireland. So absolutely, Northern Ireland Protocol is certainly another area that's still got some questions and answers. Lack of resources. Businesses not being ready. I think that's a really good point, certainly in these times, that as you know, as our time has been moved across to COVID, some of that time which we would have been spending on the EU transition, certainly that's going to be the same for some businesses. Lack of clarity around police imports. Yeah. Export health certificate process. Yeah, that's still I think still on the agenda. I know there is an expert group being set up around that. Yeah, export. So exporting is coming up quite a bit. Yeah, understanding of the new labelling, UK CE mark. So I think we are seeing some consistency there around different people's concerns. Lack of clarity. Yeah. Brilliant. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. So with these comments, we will be taking those comments away, and hopefully we can provide some of those answers to you. And it certainly helps us to shape how we engage further, because it's certainly an area that we need to work on within the coming weeks. As I say, we have got the deadline, so we do need to all be engaging at these times. So brilliant. Thank you for all of those comments and for engaging in those two questions. What I'll do now, I'll hand over to Stuart, who will take us through and discuss some of the primary authority areas of EU transition, which we've been concentrating on recently, and that we're going to be looking at going forward. And then he will pass on to Marcia. But I'll hand you over to Stuart for the next part of the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm just hopefully going to go back to the slides. Bear with me 1 second. So I think there are some, as Jackie said, some common themes there that we will take away. I know there was some elements in there about not knowing what the businesses know, and there are a couple of tools that we'll come on to later. One of the things that we wanted to talk about today was primary authority post-transition. Obviously, as the owners of the primary authority scheme, OPSS, this has been one of our key points, and the question of will primary authority still function and how will it function at the end of transition. And the good news is that we've had it confirmed through Bayes Legal and other colleagues that primary authority can continue at the end of this year. There are no legislative changes required to allow primary authority to continue. Everything that is currently in scope will remain in scope, and the EU Withdrawal Act obviously has replaced the European Communities Act. But that doesn't mean, for example, that if you've issued primary authority advice, we've quoted the European Communities Act as part of that, and the regulations that are made under it, there's no requirement to go back and change the advice you've issued. The regulations that you're advising under are still in force, and the European Union Withdrawal Act covers that. So the sort of the blurb at the bottom of that slide is kind of more of the legal detail, but the short answer that we're able to give is primary authority doesn't require any changes. It doesn't require you to reissue advice you've already issued. So from our side, that's a very positive step. The post-transition primary authority side, where the legislation comes in, I'll come back to that slide in a second. So how will the new legislation be brought into scope? Obviously, the European Communities Act was a catch-all piece of legislation and brought a lot of things within scope. And so any new legislation or changes to existing legislation will require an amendment to Schedule 3 of RESA, which obviously the Regulatory Enforcement and Sanctions Act. That is something that we are engaging with colleagues over. Going back to this slide just as a brief flowchart to identify how legislation is brought in scope. So starting at the top left, is the legislation already specified in Schedule 3? If it is, then it's already in scope for primary authority. If it's not and was made under the European Communities Act, then the regulations concerning, as you see there, animal feed, food standards, for example, they are all now caught. And so all of that remains in scope. Things that were outside scope remain outside scope. And for the changes, they will require changes to Schedule 3 of RESA, and that's something that we're working with colleagues on. The next steps, as we've sort of included there, the European Withdrawal Act in Schedule 3 of RESA, that is one of the amendments that's already in place, and it will be continuing through RESA. We're engaging with the government department policy leads, so the people that write the legislation, they are the people that will need to include within a new Act of Parliament, for example, an amendment to RESA to make sure it is brought into scope of primary authority. We are hopeful that in some cases this may allow more things to be brought in scope because we're engaging directly with policy leads, whereas previously a lot of that relied on the European Communities Act. We're also engaging with local authority partners, not only through our expert groups, regional panels, but also we're specifically engaging with the authorities in Northern Ireland because of the special status Northern Ireland will have at the start of next year. Some of the concerns that were raised in the Menti second question, obviously the status of Northern Ireland. Marcia may come on to that in a few moments, but there are tools in place to support businesses. For example, there is a Northern Ireland Trader Support Service, which is, if you just type that into any search engine, it will take you to a government website where there is support for traders bringing stuff into and out of Northern Ireland. And it can, for example, assist in filling in declaration forms and gives a lot of information to support traders. So if you do have any traders that are moving to and from Northern Ireland, moving goods to and from Northern Ireland, then this is the first stop for them to provide advice. In addition to that, I know some of you will be aware and will be attending some of our expert groups. We are also looking to form a group on Northern Ireland. Whilst not specifically an expert group, it's for those involved and supporting businesses that engage with Northern Ireland, have a significant presence with Northern Ireland, so we can actually have a group to discuss issues, share knowledge, and hopefully iron things out before they become a problem. Obviously, engaging with business partners is something we're also doing, and I believe that's something Marcia will touch on. The final thing to mention in relation to some of your comments about the product safety, UK CA marking, again, that's something Marcia will probably touch on, but at the start of this week, we ran a product safety and metrology seminar, and on Friday, I believe, there is another seminar with a specific focus on Northern Ireland. If you're not aware of that or you haven't signed up for that, please drop us a line and we can forward you the invite. That's all of the elements I've got. Please use the chat function to put any questions in, and if we've got time, we'll come to those at the end. But now I'd like to hand you over to my colleague Marcia for her to go through the work that the Trading Standards Coordination team have been doing.
That's great, thanks Stuart, and good afternoon everybody. Yeah, it makes quite a change really, and you've maybe heard this from various sessions that you've been to this week already, but quite strange to be doing all of this online rather than being in a room with you all, you know, and sort of being able to sort of chat in the margins about sort of follow-up questions and things. But yeah, good to be here, and I was just going to do sort of a really, just sort of a 10 minutes really, around some of the broader work that OPSS has been doing, sort of really, and is doing in readiness for the end of transition period. And Stuart, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So I just sort of really wanted to sort of, as I say, talk about some of the work that we've been doing in readiness for the end of transition period, highlight perhaps some of the links that you might be able to make by way of your primary authority partnerships and the business support work that those of you working in local authorities are doing, and then also talk a little bit about the support that's available to you and from OPSS. At risk of stating the obvious, of course the UK has left the EU and the transition period actually ends on the 31st of December. And whilst much of the focus of this session so far has been towards OPSS primary authority work in particular, as many of you will be aware, OPSS actually launched in 2018 and we're part of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department. The organisation took functions from previous predecessor organisations rather, and also took on some new functions. We do operate UK-wide, and thank you for that. I've just spotted the chat. And we are the national regulator for product safety and for weights and measures. And what I'm really going to focus on for sort of the next few minutes is just to give a bit of an overview of some of our preparations for the end of transition period, very much with the national regulator hat on. I do need to emphasise that the premise really, as it says here on the slide, it's about ensuring that the level of protection that's afforded to consumers against unsafe and non-compliant products isn't diminished now that we've left the EU. And I do need to caveat, and I felt a lot of the comments that were being put in the Menti first off, just around the clarity aspect. I do need to clarify that some of what I say, it's a moment in time very much really. Things are still subject to negotiations and things may change. But you know, really I'm sort of talking about how things are now. But I do want to highlight that we're very much committed to sharing what we can when we can. And in a couple of slides time, I've got a couple of links that I will post in the chat as well to guidance and information, and they will be maintained and sort of kept up to date. So they're sort of perhaps key links for you. So if I could have the next slide, please, Stuart. Thanks. So these are some of the areas within OPSS remit. Those of you working in product safety or legal metrology will no doubt recognise most of these as you'll be acting as enforcement authorities for them. And in terms of enforcement, OPSS do have some involvement, for example, in terms of noise from outdoor equipment. But these are all the areas of legislation that we're responsible for. And I suppose in terms of that legislation, the priority really has been for us to ensure that we've got a functioning regulatory regime once we've finished the transition period. And we have got legislation that's been progressing through Parliament. Most of it is already through. We've got another piece that's in the House of Lords on Friday of this week to really secure as having sort of, as I say, that functioning body of legislation. In the main, the changes really have been to remove, for example, any references to EU institutions or databases, really to make sure that I suppose the legislation makes sense for our UK regime. And just on databases, those of you that are working in product safety, and I recognised one or two names in the participant list as people joined, of course you'll be very aware that in terms of sort of UK systems, we've got the product safety database that's still relatively new, but it is very much up and running, and that's there to enable unsafe and non-compliant products to be notified, and also for sharing information between enforcing authorities. Now, in terms of the end of transition period, there are some changes that OPSS will be making to how we work, so that the process for local authorities can stay the same, and you won't need to sort of to make additional changes to how you're using the product safety database as we leave the end of transition period. So if I could have the next slide, please, Stuart. Thank you. So having said that things are subject to negotiation, there are some things that we already know will change, and colleagues have been working hard to produce guidance on those areas. Now, I don't know how many of you have maybe seen the guidance, but I think when you look at it, it looks like there's a heck of a lot, and I think that's largely because there are some very specific sector guides. So in a way that makes it easier to see at a glance what's relevant, but it does also make it look like there's a lot of guidance. Now, I don't want to sound patronising, but if product safety or legal metrology is part of your work, I would urge you to have a look at that guidance just to familiarise yourself with what's there, just so you know where things are, should you need it as part of your work, including sort of any enforcement work or any advisory work with businesses. Now, there are two links that I've included on this slide, and I will pop these two in the chat. These are the ones that will be updated as new guidance is issued or as guidance is revised. And in terms of anything that's new on those pages, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there is a little link that you can click that will it'll summarise what the changes are, so you don't have to sort of scrutinise and sort of try and spot the difference. So you can sort of see those changes at a glance. Now, the first link there is really to the overarching government guidance. So that covers everything for example, from importing or exporting from or to the EU through to staying in the UK if you're an EU citizen. And of course, like many government departments, BEIS and OPSS have produced more specific guidance to support businesses and regulators. And as it says here, because of the differences that Stuart highlighted around trade in Great Britain and Northern Ireland, we have decided to produce separate but very complementary guidance to really support businesses. Now, the link at the bottom of this page, again, is a landing page, and that will take you to both the GB and the Northern Ireland guidance. Now, there's overarching guidance on placing products on the market. I noticed on the Menti early on, there were a couple of queries around UK CA marking. That guidance covers UK CA marking, it covers CE marking and also UK NI marking. So I'd urge you to have a look at those guides. Also at that page, there are the sector-specific guides. And they cover a range of topics. At the minute, there's things like toys, electricals, packaged goods. Once finalised, they will include all of those areas of legislation that were on my earlier slide. And I suppose really this is sort of where I maybe wanted to bring it back to primary authority a little bit, and to maybe encourage you to have a think about whether there's potential opportunity for primary authorities and partner businesses to consider whether there's scope for tailoring any of that specific advice for sectors, really tailoring that to the needs of individual business. So that's maybe sort of perhaps one thing that you could maybe have a think about. And the other thing around sort of the value of primary authority advice and sort of just offering a couple of product safety examples. Businesses that are currently distributing goods from distributing goods in Great Britain from Northern Ireland, from the EU, may actually become producers at the end of the transition period. And again, I think somebody hinted at that on that Menti slide early on. So where the status of businesses change from being a distributor perhaps to a producer, there's a requirement for name and address information on documentation accompanying products. And the primary authority may well be well placed to offer advice on how a business might be able to comply with that requirement. Now, similarly, in relation to cosmetics, there's going to be a requirement to have a responsible person based in the UK. And again, that might be something that primary authorities could offer advice or support to their partner businesses on. And if I could have the next slide, please, Stuart. So to finish, just before I hand back to Stuart, I just wanted to run through some of the support that we can offer you in relation to product safety and legal metrology, just as we approach the end of transition period and sort of further into the future. So there's the guidance that I've outlined. Do take a look and share any links with your networks, sort of whether businesses and your colleagues perhaps might be interested in that. We've had one seminar. We had a seminar on Monday for local authorities in Great Britain on product safety and legal metrology towards the end of transition period. And we have a session for local authorities in Northern Ireland because the system will be slightly different there, and we're running that on Friday of this week. We also have a similar session that's going to be running for businesses in December, and the invites for that are going out hopefully later today, or if not, sort of later on this week. We've also made an offer to meet with regional product safety and legal metrology groups, just to sort of give a bit of an update, to understand any concerns, what's happening locally, and also to take questions. We do also send out frequent emails to heads of service, members of the national groups, the National Product Safety Group and Legal Metrology Expert Panel, and others to make sure that we're getting information out to update on the latest guidance and things. In terms of more specific support, as some of you may be aware, we work in partnership with CTSI to offer training to local authorities. And we've got a number of very specific sessions coming up early in the new year, including cosmetics, product safety database, and software and measuring instruments. And there will be some more sessions to follow on that. And then just very finally from me, before I hand back to, and I can see Jackie's appeared on screen, before I hand back to Jackie, so quick heads up for you. We do also offer more bespoke support where you're dealing perhaps with tricky problems or issues. There is our primary authority supporting regulator offer that's on our website. If you perhaps need specific support for an issue within your partnership. And also for more general inquiries where you've maybe not found the answer in the guidance and you're sort of struggling to come to sort of a consensus locally, then do contact us to raise an inquiry, put sort of email and phone details on there. In the current circumstances, email is a little bit easier for us, but both are there if you do want to get in touch. So thank you, everybody, and I'll hand you back to Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Okay, so I've had a quick look through this. There's not any questions come through on the chat. If anybody does have any questions for any of the panel today, please do put those questions in the chat now, and we can quickly try to answer those questions for you. But if not, Marcia is providing those links right now as I speak. So hopefully they will answer some of your concerns as well. I'll be taking away those comments that you all made on Menti on the second question around what your concerns are, and hopefully we can shape future engagement around some of those concerns which you have highlighted to us. Okay, so we'll share the link. Yes, absolutely, Adrian, we can share that link for you. Okay, so if there's no further questions coming through, I'd like to thank you all for attending this session. There are further sessions this afternoon and tomorrow, which you can still sign up for. If you haven't got details of those, please do email through to opss.inquiries@bays.gov.uk and we can send those details out to you. And if there's sessions that you have identified and want to join up to them, again, email us at that email address. And thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Thank you.